Okay, what we're going to have a quick look at now, if this comes up, just give it a sec. What are some of the common concerns that people have investing in the States? Because really you've got to be able to tick some boxes before you should start investing. That's my belief anyway. These are some of the common concerns that people have and mistakes they make. Some people only buy houses that look good. And I would think that buying in America is probably not that psychology. You probably don't want to hang your hat on that, because there's lots of people who've bought houses over the internet that look fantastic, but when they go there and have a look at them, there's not much inside the house. It's been completely ransacked, it's been foreclosed, and people get caught out doing that sort of thing. Yes, if it's an owner-occupied and you're buying an owner-occupied area, it's going to look good anyway. But if you're buying a $30,000 house in an area that's not that fantastic, the look of the house is not the thing, it's the yield that you're going to have. So just be careful about that sort of situation. Certainly, I know I found it difficult. I've actually spoken to two people here who've been researching the market for many years and haven't been able to step into the market and buy something, because it's very difficult trying to build a relationship with someone 12,000 miles away. You really need to. Even I spoke to a guy who actually flew over there and spent time talking to people over there, realtors, trying to understand the market, wanted to jump in, but 3 or 4 years later, nothing's happened. So it is difficult, and that's why we've sort of built this system to try and build some confidence with you, so you can meet the people involved, hear from investors. There's actually quite a few people in this room who've actually bought, and so I'd say in the breaks that we have, try and speak to some of them and see what's going on in their world and how they've moved forward. Because once you've got that confidence, then you can move forward and do it with a bit of gusto. Buying a property just because it's cheap, I think I've talked about that a little bit now, so you understand my philosophy. Just be careful, risk and reward, it's all about. Some of the other things I think is important, not understanding the returns on investment. This is probably one of my personal bugbears, because I've been lending people money for investment for about 17 years, and in Australia I could count on two hands the amount of people who really know the return on the properties they've bought. Yes, they could tell me what the gross return is, it's 4.2%, but they can't really tell me what the actual net figure is, what they're actually getting in their pocket, what the internal rate of return is, they don't know. In the American scene, what most companies tend to be doing is quoting a net figure. That's how they work over there. And the net figure takes into account 3 fixed costs. The fixed costs are the property management fee, whether it's 8 to 10 or 12%, the insurance on the property, and also the taxes, or we call them rates. They're the exact figures you're going to know, the fixed costs, and that's what most people sort of quote. I've taken a little bit different opinion myself, because that's not exactly what you're going to get. There's 2 other costs which I believe are they're variable costs, but eventually at some stage you're going to have them. And one of them is called a vacancy factor. Yes, pretty much everyone we deal with, you'll have a tenant placed at closing. If you're not, they'll give you a rent guarantee, one of the areas, until they have a tenant in place. So moving forward, you shouldn't have that issue, but eventually a tenant will move out, and you don't know how long it will take for that tenant to be replaced. So in all the figures on the wall there, you'll see that we actually factor in a vacancy factor. Again, it's variable, we don't know, but I'd rather have you building up a little bit of buffer in your account, so when someone does move out, you've got some money put aside to cover the costs. And that answered a question there. If a tenant moves out, there's some damage over and above the deposit, at least you've got a buffer account there. You don't have to send money from Australia to top up the account. The other variable factor you're going to have is a maintenance allowance. Now, Mark was a great example. He's got a whole big portfolio, and he's been very lucky. His maintenance bills are next to nothing. But that's not always the case. I've spoken to a lot of people over the last couple of years, and some people have lots of maintenance bills. And that also gets down to the type of maintenance or rehab or renovation done on the property. And that's why when I asked these Americans to come over here and talk to you, I wanted them to go through thoroughly how they do and what they do to the properties. As you'll see, Kansas City has a quote that they use, which I won't steal this thunder, of how they talk about how they renovate the properties and what other people do. But the main thing is to understand what quality is being put into the property, because the better the quality of the property, the less maintenance you're going to have in the first few years. And most of the areas actually will give you a 12 months hassle-free, no maintenance warranty. Not all of them yet, but that's where we're getting to. We want all of them to provide that. They have to stand by what they do, their work. So in the first year, okay, you might not have maintenance, but then in the future, you're going to have maintenance. Things happen. So we factor into our numbers a maintenance allowance. So again, you're building it up in a buffer, and eventually you'll need to use it at some stage. You can't ever expect to buy a property and never have a maintenance bill. It's unrealistic. So we factor that in there. Not setting up the right structures. We'll talk about that in a moment as to how we've had clients come to me saying, oh, Stephen, I went to the accountant, we set up a self-managed super fund. Look, we bought our first one for cash, but we do want to eventually borrow. But then they've set up a structure where an LLC is the driving force and the super fund comes off the LLC. Now, unfortunately, that accountant didn't give very good advice because that structure is not suitable for lending in America. So it's not always a client's fault, structures, you're relying on a third party, and that's why we've set up this complete circle so that people are getting advice of companies who actually know what they're doing and have actually researched the market to find out what the ATO want from a lending perspective with the super funds. And what we find is most people tend to use an LLC structure, which we'll get into in a little while, and sometimes they're having a family trust in Australia own that, and so the family trust can distribute the income any which way they want. But again, when people come on board with one of our services, you get to speak to an American accountant and an Australian accountant if you want to talk about what's going to be best for you. Because we don't give personal advice in that area, but we expect you to get the advice to make sure you make the right decision for how you're going to structure it. Also, we're not going to harp on it about the property management. That's why you're here. You need to make sure your asset's going to be protected and you need the income coming in. Okay, and the last one is talking about a goal. We've talked about that a bit before. Make sure you know why you're going into it. Mark had a very defined goal of what he's doing, what he's trying to build, and I suggest if you want to do it as well, you come up with what you want to do yourself and have that in place. These are the 8 most common concerns that the investors have. We've already talked about property management. It's number 1, it certainly is. Distance overseas. Look, some people get concerned. Property's so far away, I can't see it, can't go around the corner, but look, I think more and more Australians are getting used to investing, especially interstate. A lot of people have been chasing the mining boom in Queensland or WA, and it's a long way away. These days, I don't know how many of you have used Google Street View. It's fantastic. And one of the best reasons you want to use it is because you can actually drive around virtually around the area where you're buying. So you can see what infrastructure's in the area. Look, it doesn't really matter if it's 2 years old or 18 months old, the view. The infrastructure is generally going to be in place. Because like I've said, we focus on areas which are already built. We're not going into brand new areas or areas which have just boomed up in the last 6 or 7 years. These areas are middle ring suburbs which have been around a long, long time. So you should be able to see if there's schools there, if there's services in the area. It's very easy to be able to tell that. And even if it's a war zone, it's always going to be a war zone. So you'll be able to tell very quickly on a Google Street View whether you're buying in a war zone or a lower socioeconomic area. Especially, I don't know how many of you, when you've been to America, have gone into those areas. Probably, maybe not all of you, but certainly you'll know if you're looking at that. There's no doubt about it. And also, there's little flyers you've got there. Look, we run regular tours where we take clients over to America. We visit various cities so you can see firsthand, meet all the people involved, speak to our accountants, our attorneys, our bankers, the whole thing, one-to-one. But we are going to be running more of these events to bring them over here because this is expensive going over the States. I understand that, and that's why we're bringing the Americans over here to make it easier for you to speak to them on a regular basis. So we're certainly doing that. And for some of our clients, I know there's a couple in the room, we actually set up, if you can't make a tour but you want to go over there, we'll set you up appointments with the various areas when you go over there. So they can, one-on-one take you around and show you around through the properties and things like that as well. So quite easy way to do it. Tax issues, we'll talk about the legal issues. We actually do have an attorney in the US who puts together the LLCs for our clients. They can get quite complicated in terms of when you have an LLC, you can have what we call a one-member LLC where it's just, say, me owning it, or you could have a partnership, which is, say, husband and wife, and then that has different taxation ramifications. And what we've managed to do is the accountant we found, which is an international accountant in America, we actually buddied them up with our attorney. So they're now best friends because pretty much every week they're talking about clients' situations. So they work very hand in hand together to make sure our clients are getting what they need and the structures are set up properly. Because in America, unfortunately, a lot of the issues are state-based. So if you're a person, investor, and you're investing into 4 different states, you're actually got sort of 4 different types of rules. And that gets complicated. And so you do need to rely on an attorney and an accountant to help you sort out how you should structure this. And that's why as part of our service, you'll see the Pink Form International Portfolio Group. You get to speak to these people at the beginning of the process to work out how you should structure your LLCs, if that's the way to go, and how the tax is going to work, which we think it's very important. We've met so many people who've actually gone and bought the property and then worry about everything else afterwards, which is probably not the best way to go, but that's what a lot of people have done. Paying too much for the property, look, that should be a concern of everyone, whether you're buying in Australia or buying in Queensland or buying anywhere. What I would say is, it's not just a plug for my company, get a loan. Because if you get a loan, then you've got a third-party company sort of reviewing the property, deciding whether they're going to lend against the property. And in America, like I said, so many institutions have gone belly up, they don't want to be throwing their money away. So that's one way very easily to see what you think the value of the property is worth. Can I finance the property? Well, yes, Loans USA obviously is set up because we're financing properties. You don't need a credit score, which we'll have a look at quickly in a minute. Yes, when you get a loan, you will build a credit score, so that is going to help you get into more loans. Because we have lenders over there that once you have a good credit score, once you have lodged tax returns, they will give you a loan. But up until that stage, they won't. But all the other lenders we use, there's still plenty of them that we can give you a loan from day one without a credit score. I know there are people in Australia running seminars saying you can't get a loan, but it's not true, you can. And that's a normal loan, as Mark's seen, he's got loans. Insurance, there was a good question before about landlord's protection. They don't really have it, but the homeowner's insurance that they do have does cover damage, which we've had a claim in that regards. So if a tenant moves out, skips, well, I had a fire in one of my properties, I didn't get the rent covered, but the cheque I got back from the insurance company was more than what I paid for the house. So it wasn't too bad a situation, and now I'm actually getting more rent, or about to have been told. But I didn't get the period of time that it was being renovated again, I didn't get any rent coming in. So again, that's another good reason to have a buffer. Like, you don't know if we've had, out of over 200 clients, we've had 2 insurance claims, and both were paid, so that's a good stat. So no landlords, so house and liability are covered, but no landlords. Accounting issues we're going to get into a moment. Insurance, what's title insurance? This is, I put this up here because it's something we don't really use in Australia. There are some banks who charge it, but no one really knows about it. But in America, it's very common. It's basically making sure that there's no tax debts or any unexpected, what they call liens over there, outstanding monies against you owed on the property. So what happens if you haven't been paying your taxes, you've been foreclosed, you had a tough time, you're not going to be able to keep up your bills. And what will happen is they'll go to court, get a judgment, and those debts will go against the property. So if you do not get title insurance, those debts will be assumed by you. And I know Today Tonight, I don't watch it, but I know they've run 2 stories in the last few years about people buying in Detroit, very cheap properties, $500 I think they were, but they assumed about $15,000 in tax debt because they didn't get title insurance. And that's extreme cases, but that happens all the time. So every property that we have, if title insurance can't be is not available, then the contract will be rescinded because it's too much of a risk if you don't have title insurance. We've talked about homeowners insurance, that's the standard insurance. Now, some of the insurances, depending on where you invest, will need extensions. Like in Florida, we talked about hurricane insurance you'll need. Memphis actually is on some earthquake fault that hasn't happened for Yonkers, but the banks still require you to have an earthquake extension. The insurance we've arranged there has it in there already built in. But that's the place. So all around America, if you're in Tornado Alley, you'll probably need some tornado extension, but we're not in that sort of area at the moment. And flood insurance, some areas the banks will insist if you're getting a loan in the area which is on a floodplain, you'll need to get flood insurance as well to cover that. Accounting. This is an area which is obviously very important. As I said before, well, you don't want to run the eye of the ATO, you certainly don't want to run the eye of the IRS. So I suggest if you're buying property over there, you'll need to put a tax return and do the tax return. So we sought out an American accountant to work with our clients because we found the advice we're getting in Australia wasn't up to standard, wasn't correct in some cases and very expensive. So we went over there and sought out a different accountant. So what we're going to do now is, Jan unfortunately couldn't be over here this trip. She's going to be on an October trip that we've planned. But we've got to do a little video talking about the major issues that are facing Aussies. We have, nearly 100 clients already with her, and we've had phenomenal feedback. She does my accounts now as well over there. So we'll have a quick listen to what Jan has to say, because it'll give you a really good insight into the taxation issues you're going to face and you need to be aware of. I must say with Jan, well, she'll tell you they have a practice in Florida and one in London. So they only deal with international clients.